over to you.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, well, I think you said it all really, but I think we had a poll just to kind of get a sense check first and foremost about how whether people have kind of used digital PR before, just to kind of see where we're at really. So if you, I mean, I don't know if I'm seeing something different, Maddie, because I'm a host, but I can see like all of the questions or
Uh,
like all of the answers,
Okay.
I guess. So I think if people could just like answer the first question for now,
Yes,
that would be
please.
useful. But I don't know if that will mess things up on your end, Maddie.
We'll try it and hopefully
Right.
launch it again. As you can see, this is the first time that we're doing polls, so
Yes, could be a little bit squeaky, but we'll see. Right. We'll give people maybe a bit of extra time, but it doesn't looks like a few people have voted.
yeah. If you're not sure which question, it's question one, have you done digital PR before? That could be at the firm you're at currently or, previously in your career.
Okay. I think we've got enough answers for that. So
I will end
so
the poll and
oh,
hopefully not break it.
yeah, hopefully. Um, so it looked as though actually a few people have done digital PR before, which is great. But there was, I think, a couple of people that aren't really sure what it is. So just to kind of give a very basic overview, it is really just getting coverage on um, online platforms like news coverage, that kind of thing. So whether that be a brand mention where you just kind of get your client name out there and any fee earner names out there, or whether it be yeah, or whether it be a link to your website as well, which is super important for SEO purposes to help you kind of get ranking for certain key terms. Um, so, I mean, I don't know if people are feeling confident because we have a few cameras off, but I don't know if anyone who has done digital PR before would be comfortable to maybe give us a little overview of what sort of things you did just to hear. But no worries if not, no pressure. But if anyone does have any insight, that would be really good to hear.
And feel free to put it in the chat and I can read it out for you.
Matt, if you just let me know if there's anything on
Yes.
your end.
There's nothing yet, but we'll give it
Okay.
another 10 seconds, maybe. I'm sure this is going to jog people's memory and they'll remember what type of they've
Yeah,
done.
exactly. So I'll just like go straight into it. But if anyone does have some stories to share, that would be great. But for now, I'll just take you through what we'll be chatting about today. So obviously, I've briefly kind of explained what digital PR is, and I do want to kind of bust some myths as well, because I think there are preconceptions that we need to stamp out somewhat. And then I'll take you through some of the ways that we like to use to create stories that actually appeal to journalists and then just some tips for getting that reaching out to journalists and the sort of collateral that you need to provide to them to get the best chance of actually obtaining the coverage for them and giving them everything they need to give you the best chance of success. Oh, my slides are okay. So, firstly, a bit of myth busting. So, like I said, I think there is a bit of a preconception about what PR is. And I think in my experience, I've sort of realized that business leaders equate PR with media relations, so building and maintaining relationships with media networks. And the media landscape, I would say, in my experience, is not really what it used to be. It's no longer, I think, the idea that you have to kind of schmooze journalists, take them out for meals and that sort of thing. But having been in the industry for nearly 5 years, and I came to it relatively new, um, I had at the time and still have almost no personal connections with journalists, but we still obtain an average success rate of 70% over the time that I've worked here and 81% in 2024. Now, my success rate is at least one piece of coverage for a campaign. So yeah, so 70% overall and 81% in 2024. And that is without any personal relationships with journalists. And I think now it's actually more about achieving earned media coverage, mostly online rather than in print. And it now kind of couples up quite nicely with SEO to boost your brand image and improve your site authority so that you can kind of rank higher for relevant search terms. And I think within this, I just want to address a twofold issue here, which is the first side of things. I think law firms think they won't be able to get coverage without these media relations. So they kind of focus their energy on that side of things. And then on the flip side, we have others who think that just because they are on this first name basis with the local journalists, that person in the press will just give them coverage if they drop into their email inbox. And I mean, the reality is that journalists receive thousands of emails a day and likely will just delete anything that doesn't really serve them a purpose right that second. And equally, they probably don't really have time to answer the phone like they might have used to. So unless you're sending them something that kind of provides them a purpose for that time, and if they're writing a story about that thing that you just happen to drop in about, they'll probably just ignore it. And we do have a handful of ongoing journalist relationships with journalists, but these were initially forged from PR campaigns. And ultimately, you just need to be providing them with value every time you email them, by crafting stories that matter. So that is the kind of myth busting element of things. And now I'm just going to just go through how you can actually create those stories for journalists. And I think I did want to ask the audience a question here, but again, maybe there aren't that many people kind of with cameras on, so no worries if not. But I mentioned them briefly in the intro, but does anyone here know of any tactics to create stories to get coverage? Maybe those with their cameras on. I mean, you guys are all my colleagues, so you might be able to just jump in here.
I would say making a start on Twitter
Yeah,
and
yeah.
following some hashtags.
That is actually great. A great segue, Laura. Thank you for that, because my next slide is all about that. So one of the ways that we like to approach journalists is just reacting to current news topics. And we have a few ways that we like to react to news. And yes, like Laura said, following the hashtag journey request on X, I always slip and say Twitter there still, but following the hashtag journey request, you can just type it into the search bar. And this is basically an area where journalists, if they want a comment on a story that they're currently writing, they might use that hashtag as a kind of call out to PRs and other people in any industry, really, to say, oh, I need a comment on this, that, and the other. And then quoted is also another sort of version of this, but it's more of a platform that you sign up to. And it's the same kind of premise, really, but you just get email alerts with topics relevant to you. And there are a bunch of others that I've tried over the years, but I personally find that these two are the most fruitful. So here are just some examples of what these look like. So the black ones at the top are the journal requests. So you can see here we had someone looking to speak to an employment lawyer about the rules around employing teens still at school. And we had another here asking about child maintenance and looking to speak to someone, divorce lawyers, about that kind of thing. And really the idea with these is you just drop the journalist a DM. Sometimes if you head to their profile, they might have their email address in the bio there. So I think that's probably a good way to approach them, is via their email, and just use the subject line response to journal request, and then give them the details. And I think at this stage, it's really good to give them everything they're asking for. If they're asking a specific question in the journal request, give them that information off the bat, just to make it as easy as possible for them. But if, in these cases, I think they're just asking around, putting some feelers out. So in that case, you can just say, oh, I'm an employment lawyer, I can help with this. Let me know if you need a comment, and send over some questions and I'll answer them for you. And then the white ones at the bottom here are the quoted, some quoted examples. So you can see we have a range here. We've got someone looking for, again, an employment lawyer, someone looking for a UK-based land law expert, and someone looking for someone to talk about trimming your neighbour's hedge. So it's a real range. And actually, the one on the left with HR Magazine has been one of those rare occasions where we've actually obtained an ongoing relationship with the journalist who, after we sort of helped her with this specific situation here, she often gets back in touch and asks for comment. So that's probably the one and only relationship I've made this whole time since we've kind of worked on this. But so you can kind of see here that yes, those relationships can be forged, but if you can just provide value to journalists regardless, you can still get coverage. Oh, and this is just an example of some coverage that we achieved from just responding to this sort of thing. This is a really quick way of getting coverage. In this case, it was a journalist at Fiverr, which is kind of freelance kind of platform. And they wanted comment from legal professionals about tips for startups. And here we managed to get not just a brand mention, but a link as well. And the great thing about this was that it was a highly authoritative website, which helps just to boost our clients' authority in the sort of field of business. So another way that we like to react to news is to provide a new take on a current topic. So I have another poll here, so it'd be really good actually if people could get involved here to kind of maybe bust a bit of a misconception that I think some people might have. So if people could just answer, fill in the poll for number 2. You're a family lawyer and you see a news article talking about the change in family law. Do you A, email the journalist asking them to add a comment from you to the published story? B, call them up and tell them you have a comment for their story? C, craft a press release about this change in the law and send it to them to cover? Or D, none of the above?
And while people are doing that, I just had a question actually, Joanna. So
Yeah, sure.
you mentioned journo requests, that's obviously on X. I guess for journalists, X is still a really great platform for them, but a few of our law firm clients have recently come off X, and it's something that there is an internal discussion about, conscious maybe not staying on X anymore because of all the changes that have been made to the platform, things like that. So how do you think this is going to affect journalists and also the work you do? Because I feel like with X, you a lot of the time can't follow a hashtag unless you have an account or something with them.
Yeah.
What is your sort of advice on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because I would say that over the time that even I've been doing this, things have petered off. Even in people aren't really using the hashtag as much, and it does yield some fruit. But I think I think in my experience, people are transitioning to things like Quoted and other platforms like that. If you can just search for, platforms like Journo Request, but if anybody wants me to kind of put together a little list of other ones that we have used in the past, or just to give people more scope, then I'm happy to do that after this if anyone is interested in getting, signing up to those and getting those email alerts. I do think that seems to be the thing that people are doing more than journo requests now.
Fantastic. We'll send you all a follow-up email with the recording, so if you are interested in that list, just let us know then and Joanna can get in touch. Right, I'm going to end the poll so we can see the results.
Yeah, so the person who said none of the above was correct. And the reason being that if someone's already talking about a topic and they've already got a piece of news coverage out there about a change in family law, unless you can add something new to this topic, don't even bother, don't even waste your time. You don't really want to be emailing the journalist to ask them to add a comment from you after they've already had the story published, because it's just not really something that anyone does. You don't want to call them up because people just don't do that anymore. And most journalists actually have a thing on their kind of profile on a lot of platforms saying don't call. And actually, if you do try and call, a lot of the time it will just take you through to reception, and it's just worthless. And then the other option was craft a press release about this change in the law and send it to them to cover. Now, this would be great if they hadn't already covered that story. Like I say, you need to be providing a new take on the news if it's already out there. There is absolutely no point in rehashing what's already been done. So who was the one who said none of the above?
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, well done. Oh, we've got someone else who's just asked to come in. Right, so yes, the answer was none of the above. And this is just an example of what I mean by this. So This was a story that had already been published. Health board staff shared patient data on WhatsApp. And you can see on the right here, this is the Google kind of news for this specific data breach that occurred, the NHS Lanarkshire data breach. So people were already talking about this topic. And with our data breach client that we have, we thought, well, what can we do to add something to this? Because we want to jump on this and show that we know what we're talking about. And well, when I say we, I mean the client, a data breach client. We want to jump on this and make it look like they're kind of part of the conversation. So what could we do that would help us achieve that? And this, I mean, I know that the text is quite small, so I'm hoping that everyone can see it okay. But I'll just explain. Our different take was we combined the story with data that we'd already used in 2 previous campaigns regarding healthcare and office data breaches. And then we sort of just explained why widespread lack of GDPR training was a leading cause. And you can see our subject line for this is expert says Lanarkshire NHS data breach, part of a systemic problem. So we're not just reporting on the story here that, yes, there was a data breach. We're saying, look, here's a potential reason why this is a problem. And we're saying, actually, it's not just NHS Lanarkshire, it's the healthcare system overall. And in fact, the data that we've used in previous campaigns has shown that the health sector is and has been for a long time #1 for data breaches out of all the sectors, which is very concerning, of course. And that just adds that level of, oh, okay, this isn't just a one-off. This is a systemic problem. And we're also saying expert says, and that's leveraging our client's position as experts in the data breach field as well, which is always useful. And this was just a piece of coverage that we achieved from this. We sent this off to people who had already spoken about the data breach, and then we also sent it off to people who just cover data breach overall, just even if they hadn't already spoken about it. And so we actually ended up getting coverage on a few sites that hadn't published anything about it yet. And we got 20 pieces of coverage, 12 with links, just from this small campaign, really. Okay, so we've talked about jumping on news. Now, how do you then create news and get into the news that way? And I kind of touched on it earlier, but this providing expert commentary on changes in the law is a really good way of doing this. So I have an example here, which isn't really changes in the law, but it's more just jumping on any kind of relevant topic. So in this case, Family Mediation Week was approaching soon, and we just wanted to provide a call to action for people to consider mediation. And then when we kind of sat down to do this campaign, we thought, I just feel like that's not enough. We're not really giving much of a hook here. So we had a little look at some data. The Family Court, they publish quarterly data, which in this case looked at court timeframes. And when we looked at the data, it showed that court timeframes hit 40, so our subject line was law firm urges families to choose mediation as court timeframes hit 46 weeks. So people were looking at waiting 46 weeks to receive any kind of update about their divorce or whatever it might be. So you can see how kind of crazy that is. And so we put this in an email, and you can see here on the right-hand side, I've just shown the 3 sort of subject lines that we used. We sent this to family kind of law publications, and we also sent it to York publications as well, Yorkshire publications, because that was where the client's based. So that was just a really great way of using a little bit of data to give it more of a hook, and also jumping on current awareness days, or this kind of theory also applies with new laws that are coming into play. Say, the no-fault divorce law came into play a few years ago. When any updates were coming out about that would have been a great opportunity to jump in on that before anyone else and just say, here's the expert's opinion on this topic. But here we just used a bit of like a shock factor to say, look, these are the stats. This is how long you could be waiting. Here's a call to action to start using and considering mediation during this awareness day. And just by doing that, we achieved 13 pieces of coverage, 11 with links. And these 2 were probably our top pieces of coverage. We have the Yorkshire Post, which is obviously great for a client based in that location, and then also Solicitors Journal, which is another great piece of published work, as lawyers do quite like to just appear in those sorts of publications, just to show that they are, they are talking about these things, and they are authorities on those topics as well. Oh, sorry, it's not working. There we go. And then you could also just start a conversation about popular topic as well. It doesn't have to be so serious. It can be a bit more exciting. So this is one we did a while ago, back when ChatGPT first appeared. And I mean, you guys all know, everyone was talking about it. But the thing with this was we knew that it was going to continue being spoken about. But we also knew that it would die out. The conversation would die out pretty quickly. So within probably about a few weeks after people started to talk about this, we jumped in pretty quickly for a conveyancing solicitor. And we basically just wanted to put a bit of a spin on the topic. Everyone was talking about it anyway. So what kind of spin could we put on this that would make it relevant to our conveyancing client? And in this case, we just assessed how ChatGPT responded to first-time buyer queries to give a sense of whether it was an authority on that topic or not. So in this case, I'll just show you the landing page that we published on the client's website, which has all the information. Wait, can you see this okay? I don't know if I need to share. No.
No, I think you need to stop sharing the slides and then reshare your screen.
Yeah. So if I share the landing page, share, can you see we analyze ChatGPT's responses?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was the landing page that we published on the client's website. And in the landing page, we just explained what ChatGPT is and why it's kind of a current topic. And then we fed these sorts of questions into ChatGPT. How to get a mortgage as a first-time buyer. We provided the answer that ChatGPT gave, and then we did some analysis, and we said whether this was an accurate response or not. And if I just share back on the... Can you see the slides again, but not presenter view?
Yes.
So our assessment basically just showed us that ChatGPT cannot rival conveyancing solicitors. So that was our ultimate story. And you can see here the email that we sent to the client, to the journalists about this topic. Study proves ChatGPT cannot rival conveyancing solicitors. And we just gave an overview of this topic. So you can see here how you can be a bit more fun with it. You can jump on current trends, but you just need to make it relevant to you as a solicitor. And in this case, we did get a fair amount of coverage. We got 10 pieces, 5 with links. You can see here the sorts of publications that we got coverage on. Two here from, the property sphere, and 2 here from the legal sphere, again, showing that our clients have this authority not only in the property space, but also just in the legal space. And I think our client actually, someone mentioned it to them that they'd been mentioned in the Law Gazette. So it did actually, get seen by people within the law industry, which was really great to hear. Oh, sorry, my slides are not changing. And then you can also just revive a previous conversation with new updates. But again, I will always say you have to be creating, something new. So this is just an example that we did recently, actually, for our data breach client. So back in 2022, People's Energy experienced a data breach, but then the company went bust. And years later, actually like a few months ago, our client received comms that the company administrators would be actually reserving money for those affected by the breach. And they were currently dealing with the group action claim to claim money from People's Energy. So there had been loads of coverage at the time, but we had this new information, which was really valuable, which was essentially there's a claim happening. This is how many people are already involved. 270,000 people were affected by the breach, and only 300 are currently claiming. So, here's a call out to anybody else who'd been affected. And you can see here, we also had, which was even better, a monetary figure from our client, which is gold when it comes to PR stuff. So they suggested that each of their claimants could claim up to £1,000 each for the emotional and financial strain caused. So that was kind of our hook, really. And you can see here the subject lines that we used for this topic, which was time is running. Oh, that was another thing. Time was running out because I think there was a time limit on they had to claim within 2 months or something. So there was a time limit. We had a monetary figure, and we also knew how many people had been affected and how many people were claiming not that many. So it was actually just a perfect storm for us to be able to get some coverage. And you can see here some of the coverage we achieved for this. We got 19 pieces, 8 with links. You can see the sort of local papers took a real shine to this story, which was great because obviously, People's Energy, they were, I think they are national, so it was good to be able to target all those local papers and hopefully get some. We did, in fact, get some good results for the client in that particular case. And then the other way to create news is to use data, which is my number one favorite. So this is another question for the audience, but can you think of any sources for data that could be useful to craft stories from? Anybody?
ONS.
ONS, yeah, that is a good one.
That's what I was going to say.
I do bang on about it.
Statista as well.
Yeah, Statista's good as well, but I think we've had issues with that, haven't we, Tamar, where you have to pay quite a bit to kind of they give you a little teaser and then they're like, oh no, actually you can't look at this. You have to pay loads of money. So it is good if you kind of know what you're looking for and you have a good idea of what you can use it for. But yeah, so those are some of the examples, but there are loads of sources of data out there. So yes, those 2 examples, Statista and ONS, are just some of the many places that you can find data externally. So there's Land Registry has data. Trying to think who else has data. Oh yeah, like I said, the family courts have data. And the great thing about a lot of these data sets is that they have data across multiple local authorities as well, especially the ONS. They do lots of local authority stuff, and you'll see how good that can be for us a bit later. And then I think one untapped tool, which a lot of journalists, a lot of law firms might not really think about, is the data within kind of their own business. We have one client that we do this regularly for, where we do a yearly overview of the data from the sorts of clients and the demographics that they deal with. So that works really well. So this is for a conveyancing solicitor, and it works really well actually, because it just sort of gives us a hook to say, oh, look what happened in the property sphere last year. We've got some actual figures to prove X, Y, Z. And then brand new data is also another option, but this does incur another cost. So this is essentially where you hire a survey company or a polling company to you provide them with some questions, and they reach out to the sort of audience that you're looking to capture data from, and then you get original data, which is so valuable in this sphere. But yeah, like I say, it can incur some extra costs. So you can make use of data sets that are already freely available. And I think what I will say as well at this stage is data tables and not reports are the best option here, because from the data we end up creating reports. So you don't really want to be using reports that other people have created, because it feels a little bit like you're just kind of stealing what they've already done. If they've already found percentages and patterns, you're not really adding anything new to that. So having the raw data set and finding your own patterns and own percentages and things like that, creating your own angles from that data, that's the most valuable tool here. So I think tips for presenting data is something that I do want to cover, because it's not just about saying here's some data. It's about finding the key elements of it and crafting them into stories that actually matter to the journalists. And like I say, you want to make their lives as easy as possible. So the least work that they can do, the better. So finding patterns is the first tip. And throughout, I've got each tip, and then I've got some examples of where we've utilized those tips. So in this scenario, we compared house prices from January to December 2023 to show the areas where the prices increased or decreased the most or the least. And then we ordered these locations from top to bottom. And you can see here just an example of the sorts of coverage that you can achieve by doing that. It works really well, like I said, having that local angle. If you can say, oh, look, here's a pattern. These, locations in Wales are number one for house prices decreasing the most, or something like that. That's a great way of presenting data and creating a story that actually is of interest. And in this case, we had someone covering it with the 12 places in Wales where house prices are falling. And obviously, as you can imagine, that is a hot topic. If house prices are falling, well, why, for starters? And also, oh, like, is that somewhere that you want to move to because the cost of living is so high as it is? So in all of these cases, we're finding patterns, but also creating a story that is relevant. Why now? Yes, we have this data on a platter for you that we've organized, but why is it interesting now? And house prices are always an interesting topic. I mentioned percentages as well, but here's an example of where we actually utilize percentages. So in this case, we compared house prices and salary data. So we had two separate sets of data, and we basically found the percentage change of house prices over time, the percentage change of salaries over time, and we found the sort of difference between those changes to ascertain areas where there was the largest disparity between salary and house price, and then the smallest disparity between salary and house price. And again, you have that idea of, well, the closer those graphs are, the better. So in this case here, we did get some coverage, a few pieces in local papers. We targeted all the kind of locations in the top of that, largest disparity and smallest disparity, those top 10, bottom 10 figures. And we reached out to those locations with the story from those particular areas. And in this case, here's some coverage with East Devon being one of the most affordable places to buy a home in the UK. Speaking in layman language is another one, which I think is really simple, actually, but I think it gets not ignored, but people forget that you can present data in a really digestible way. So here's an example here. I think you might remember I mentioned earlier about the data which showed the sectors for data breach in the sectors from top to bottom that were most impacted by those breaches. So as I said, the health sector is the biggest culprit, with 17% of data breaches involving the health sector, which is, again, shocking. But some people, I think it's percentages, schmercentages, if that makes sense. What does that even mean? Some people don't really understand percentages. So how can you make that talk to people, the average person? And how can you make it actually visual? Like in this case here, we reached out with more of a number figure, so 1 in 10. So the health sector, that's almost 20%. So that's about 1 in 5. You can see how that sounds a lot different, and it actually sounds larger, doesn't it, if you say 1 in 5? And it makes it a bit more shocking. So, and like I say, the shock factor is one of those things that's super, super great, when you're trying to reach out to journalists. So 1 in 10 data breaches in 2023 were in the legal sector, new data reveals. So you can see how that's a lot more digestible. And I think I touched on this a bit earlier, but pitting areas against each other. So this is the kind of same one as before. You can send off campaigns to local areas about how their area fares against other locations. You can do this either on a national scale, so you can say like Devon #1 for housing affordability, or you can do almost micro study and say, for example, Devon, I could have reached out to Devon about the local authority. And I think actually that's what we did here. We reached out to Devon about the local authorities in Devon specifically. And we said, oh, how are the local authorities in that area faring against one another? And which local authority in Devon is the best for house prices? And I mentioned shocking people, and I also mentioned monetary values as being quite a good shock factor. I mean, throughout, you can definitely see how we use the shock factor in our subject lines to entice the journalists. But here's a great example of the shock factor. So this headline is Pembrokeshire residents among those owing 97 million in inheritance tax. In this scenario, we found the money owed in inheritance tax to each local government, and we reached out with those million figures to the local press, which was, super shocking. If you saw that as a headline, you would, it's a bit of a stomach drop when you think, wow, that's a lot of money. And they really, in this example, the Pembrokeshire Herald really ran with that title. And I think we actually initially said that Pembrokeshire owed, a few, maybe 1 or 2 million, or maybe like 5 million or something like that. But they added up all the money in Wales that from those figures that we gave them and said 97 million is owed to the Welsh government. And then they said they used that to craft their headline of Pembrokeshire residents among those owing 97 million, essentially, to the Welsh government. So they ran with that larger figure, but you can see how shocking that is and how headline worthy that is. And then finally combining data sets. And like I say, I touched on this one earlier, but this is the example of the house prices and salary changes converging. And we actually, in this case, provided data tables for each location that we reached out to, because that just provided a lot more of a visual for them. And in this case, very strangely, they just copied our Excel created table and published it, which was quite amusing. So here you can see the property sales in blue, the house prices in orange, and the annual income in grey. And you can see really visually how different that is, and the disparity between the two figures. And yeah, this got us coverage in numerous places based on the local data that we provided. So I think this is the final one for in terms of the kind of tactics that we use. So business news is another one, and this might be one that I think everyone's a bit more familiar with. So I think we have another poll here, Maddie, that would be good to ask everyone. So I don't know if, yeah, thank you. So this is, you know a journalist in your local area and you want them to cover a story about a company merger. Do you A, drop them an email telling them about it and ask them to cover it? B, call them up and ask them to cover the story? C, craft a press release about the merger and send it to them? D, none of the above.
That's question 3, if you aren't sure.
Thanks, Maddie. Nice.
Cool. I'm just sharing the results for everyone to see.
Nice. Great work, everyone. You've been listening. Yeah, so in this case, it's news. It is a new information. No one else knows it. So crafting a press release about the merger and sending it to them is great. But how do you do that? How do you make it newsworthy? And how do you get the best chance of coverage? So I have some examples here where we did it. And I mean, they're all pretty similar. Like it's very cut and paste. Once you've done this once, you can do it again. This is an example of a new partner being, what's the word? We were telling everyone about this new partner. So in this case, the client just wanted it to be sent out to local papers in the Wokingham area, and also to just get out into the law sector as well. So I think that the main takeaway from this example is you just need to provide them with everything they need to be able to publish the story outright. So in this case, we sent them a photo of the person. We sent it to the Wokingham Press specifically with a Wokingham subject line, which made it extremely relevant to them. They can see, oh, why should I publish this? Why should I publish this story? Oh, well, because it is actually relevant to your locality. Yeah, we just gave them everything they need. And in this case, we achieved 6 pieces of coverage, one with a link on these kind of business law sites. And I think really the main thing to take away from this is just because you have that relationship with that Wokingham journalist doesn't mean that you can just call them up and say, oh, like, we've got this happening, can you cover it? Or similarly, drop them an email with that. Because I think there was one occasion where a client she wanted to speak to us because she was struggling to get coverage, and she wasn't quite sure why she wasn't getting it, because she had these relationships with journalists, but it just wasn't really working. And it was as simple as just explaining to her that you can't really do that, because as you can imagine, they get so many emails all the time. You need to just give them on a platter, on like a silver platter, here's everything you need to cover this story. And that, in our experience, is the best way to generate that business news coverage, which otherwise is somewhat a bit dry and isn't really worth writing up unless it's handed to you. No offense to anyone who's got business news, because I'm sure it's super interesting, and I'm sure everyone would want to cover it, but you just need to give them everything that they need for it. So here's another example. It was the same client, and in this case, they were merging. And in this case, we not just gave them the why angle, which was, you're based in Wokingham, so cover this. It was the why now. And we made this seem like a really golden opportunity, because we said, you can't publish this yet. So we sent it in December last year, and the news was supposed to come out on the 2nd of January. That was when the merger was occurring. So we said to them, don't publish this until the 2nd of January, which provided that kind of exclusivity that I guess speaks to some journalists. They feel like they're the ones who are kind of breaking the story. And this was really great, because it was talking about they really kind of talked and wanted to bring in the fact that this was a real community thing, because the two kind of companies merging were really like big in the local area, and really, it was a big thing and a really great thing for the local community that this was happening. And that was the main hook, really. So again, we got 4 pieces of coverage, one with a link, and again in the sort of business law sphere. And then here's an acquisition, and this is actually one of ours that we did. So this was back when we acquired the Law Firm Marketing Club, which is essentially just kind of like a community for law firms to network and share ideas. And it's a really great tool for them to get involved in. I think if no one on here is involved, I'm not really sure, but you can probably get in touch with Maddie afterwards and get some more information about that. But in this case, Conscious was acquiring the Law Firm Marketing Club, and it's, again, we just giving everything on a silver platter, and we're reaching out to relevant publications in the law sphere, speaking to them, providing a quote and saying, this is why this is really important, and this is why it affects the law industry. And from that, we then did achieve some coverage as well, which was great for appearing in those kind of law related publications. So another question, I'm going to move on to the tips to the kind of framework that we tend to use for every campaign, the cut and paste sort of template that we tend to use to get coverage using all of these different tactics. But I've mentioned a few elements that you would maybe use in a campaign, but I just wanted to hear if anyone has any thoughts on the elements that I might mention next that are perfect to generate coverage. So any thoughts about the elements that you might need to use to create a campaign?
A grippy subject line.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Any other thoughts? No. Um, so I'll just go straight in. So this is like tried and true formula, really. So firstly, you might remember me showing you that ChatGPT landing page. So a landing page is something that we love to use for this. And here's another example of oh, hang on, it's not gonna show. I'm gonna have to share my screen again, aren't I? Share. Can you see this housing affordability one?
Yeah.
So this is that one. I think I mentioned that previously about the kind of house affordability in different locations. So this is a landing page that we wrote. So once we'd collated data about the areas that were most affordable, we put all of this in a landing page. And this is great for two reasons. The first being that you are going to provide the journalists with everything they need in their locality, the information for their locality or whatever it might be. But they might just want to know what's going on the kind of other locations. They might just want to have a hub to go back to for any other elements of the story that they might want to put into their story. So this is really just the hub that you direct them to. Not only that, but then if you send them a link with the hub of data, the more likely they are going to be to link to your page, which is the ultimate goal really with all of this. As I mentioned, it's great for not only referral traffic, but it's also great for that SEO boost to your authority. And then the landing page also serves another purpose, which is organic linking later down the line. And we've had this happen before where we've produced a landing page like this, which has some really great data. 2 years later, we get links coming in from somebody who's just, written a random blog post one day or a random article one day about that topic. They've searched on Google housing affordability for, 2024 or whatever it might be. And they stumble upon this page, which has reams of data and it shows you the top and the bottom 10. They are more likely to link to you then. And so it's like I say, it's the twofold thing of those immediate links and then also those organic links later down the line as well, which are super useful just to keep those links coming in. Sharing back to the presentation now. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. So that's a landing page. And then the other thing that I've mentioned a few times is press release and email. So I've shown a few emails, but I wanted to show you the platform that we use to craft emails and how we sort of structure it all. So again, I'm going to have to share my screen and show you. So this is Roxhill. This is what we use. Can you see Roxhill?
Yes.
This is what we use to put together our campaigns. And this is essentially a place where journalist contacts are housed here. So we can build our journalist contact lists here, and we can also then craft and distribute our press releases and emails. So when I talk about press releases, what I'm really talking about is this document here, which is the full story. So this is giving all the information about the data. And this is still that affordability campaign that we've been talking about. So I think we'll stick with that just to keep it uniform. But in this case, we've got the press release, which is saying Blackpool is the 9th most affordable place to buy a home in the UK. And we're giving them all the information about the data. We're giving them the graph about Blackpool. We're giving them the commentary about what we're seeing on this graph. And we're giving them, well, a lot of commentary, blah, blah, blah. We're giving them some tables to show the top and bottom 10 locations. We're giving them a quote, expert quote from the client to say this is why this is important. So that's what when I say press release, that's what I mean. This should be the story, basically. But you can't really send a press release without an email to accompany it. So this is the email that we sent in this occasion. And you can see it's really similar to the press release, but it is just a shorter version of that press release. And you can see here the very short, sharp, and it's like you said, Maddie, the subject line is super important. And you can see we're reaching out to, in this case, the Blackpool press, saying specifically Blackpool, so that's YU, is the ninth most affordable place to buy a home in the UK. Why now in this scenario is the fact that the data was recently released. So we did this same thing. So it was very cut and paste for Burnley. Burnley, least affordable place to buy. Cornwall, 10th most affordable place. Devon, second. So it's the same thing for all of these, with the same sort of email and the same press release and the same kind of subject line. So it doesn't have to be super different, but we're just saying, okay, well, we're siphoning off the different locations with their specific topic. Sorry, I'm trying to share back to the presentation now. Hopefully this is the right one. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
So that's the kind of crafting of the press release and the email. And then, like I sort of mentioned, you do also need to be sending that story to the right people. So, like I mentioned, there's the local element of things. So you say, this is the specific case study for Blackpool, and we're sending it to you because you are based in Blackpool and you write about Blackpool. And similarly for Burnley and Cornwall and Devon. But you can also do that on a thematic scale as well. So you might remember that data breach, 10 industries, sectors involved in data breaches. That is a great way to siphon off the story to different publication sectors. So you can say, oh, you love talking about health and you are a health publication. So I'm going to send you the story about how the health sector compares to everywhere else. And you could do then the same for legal and the same for education and so on and so forth. And yeah, it's just about providing them with their angle that's relevant to them, the case study that shines a light on what they like to focus on. And then the follow-up. Now this is really important. You can't just send them an email that says, "Oh, did you see my last email?" It doesn't really work like that. And like I said, they get thousands of emails all the time. So I'm going to show you an example here of both the first email that we sent and then the follow-up email that we sent to that same contact list, but a few days later. So let me just open. Oh, is it going to work? Oh no, I did put a link in it. Oh no, I don't think I need to actually go there, to be honest. So I thought that I put a link in there, but never mind. You can just see what I screenshotted. So in this case, we were so this was for our data breach client. We were assessing the fines that local businesses had received for data breaches. So in this case, we reached out to kind of a bunch of counties with their, like I said, their specific story. And in this case, Berkshire businesses faced £65,000 worth of fines for GDPR violations. We provided the information. This again, it's the same framework. The information about the data that we used, the specific data for that Berkshire business, and then some commentary and some quote as well. And then you can see here, this was sent to the exact same contact list, but just a couple of days later, and you can see how it varies. So this is the first one, and this is the second one, and we are just giving them a whole new angle, crafting them a whole new version of this. And we just said, rather than the monetary value of Berkshire businesses face £65,000 worth of fines, we said urgent GDPR compliance warning for Berkshire businesses. So this is not just kind of the news. This is saying this needs action. This is a problem. This needs action. And you can see how we did shorten the email a little bit, and we slimmed it down a bit, and we gave them just the key information. And then under this is the press release, as it always is. So that's the follow-up kind of difference there. But just to reiterate, you don't want to just send them a cold email saying, did you receive my last email? So to summarize the tips for improving your chances is you need to give them something new or current. You can't just rehash what's already been done. You need to break your story down in smaller chunks. You can do national stories, but in our experience, it's quite difficult to get in there unless you really have like a breaking news story. So I would suggest breaking the data or the story up into smaller, more manageable chunks and tailoring it to the location that you are based, or the various locations with the same story, but just for their location. And then similarly, you can do the same for themes as well. Subject lines should be the story. So that's going to be the first thing that the journalist sees. So that needs to be the that needs to be short, it needs to appear. So imagine you have to imagine that you receive that in your inbox. So what we tend to do is we send ourselves previews of the email just to kind of be like, how does that look? How does that appear in my inbox? Does it go off and just disappear in like a super long subject line? And if so, we tend to go back and we'll change it to something a little shorter so that it appears fully in that inbox. Provide them with somewhere to link to that's relevant. So I mentioned the landing page. If you don't have the budget or the time to do a landing page, I mean, I would always recommend a landing page for a data-led campaign, because you need to have that hub for not only the linking and the kind of journalist, here's all the information you need, but also for that organic SEO element as well, which I mentioned. But you can just send them your local service page as well. And I think you might have seen maybe back here. Oh no, we didn't do it here. But sometimes we will just direct them to the locals, to the Berkshire service page in that instance, if they have one, or the relevant data breach service page. But to be honest, that the journalists are less likely to link to a service page or a homepage. That's why having that data-led landing page is super useful, because it really does encourage that link, which they otherwise probably won't give. Track your coverage. So just quickly, we use Google Alerts. So we set up our client names in Google Alerts so that anytime they get mentioned in Google or online, we get an alert and we can see if there's any coverage. We also use Talkwalker alerts as well. I'm happy to kind of, if anyone wants to know more about this, I can write it up for anyone in the email if necessary. But Talkwalker is also the same thing, really. You just, in quotation marks, say you want to specifically look for any mention of your company name in the news, and you can just track it that way as well. And then once you tracked the coverage, keep track of it and make a note of whether a link has been included or not, and go back and ask for a link if they haven't. We always do this. I mean, there are some occasions where we don't, and it's really just based on the fact that we know that they won't link because we've asked them before. But I would always say ask for a link and just say, oh, here's the data landing page, for your audience, just to see if they might want to know more about this topic. So please, if you want to, can you just link there? And that's a great way to encourage those links. And it doesn't always work, but it does sometimes. So that's why we do it. And then finally, always follow up with a new story or angle, like I showed you previously. I'm trying to click, but it's not going. Sorry about this. There we go. Key takeaways. So yeah, finally, these are just the things that I've mentioned throughout, but just these are sort of the top 10 things that I would mention. So you can't just send journalists a press release and expect coverage just because you know them. It's unlikely to happen unless you really give them a hook to publish. And like I mentioned a few times, you need to say why this, why now, why is it relevant to you, and why is it relevant to you now? And that might be because the data was released recently. That might be because the laws just changed. It might be because an awareness day is happening. It might, there are hundreds of reasons why you might want to say why now, but you need to make it relevant to them at that moment. Reacting to current news is only advised if you're providing a new take, something that hasn't been done before. Sign up to Quoted and keep tabs on journal requests, but probably, like Maddie has said, if you're not using journal X, then forget journal request. Quoted often has a lot of the same things, so I would suggest just even starting there as a good base point. You need to be providing value or something new. You can't be just rehashing the same old stuff. You should consider using data to craft stories. As you've seen, it provides a wealth of opportunities. I would really emphasize that. And if you are just a local law firm, you don't have to be doing all the stuff that we're doing and reaching out to hundreds of locations, well, not hundreds, but tens of locations in one go. You can just find a data set, look specifically at what's going on in your area, and just do a case study on what's going on there and make it relevant to your local papers, and just send it to them. Gives them something like a story to actually cover. But it's less of the work that we obviously do because we're working on national kind of scale sometimes. And when you present data, you need to be presenting it in a digestible way. So like I said, percentages, patterns, comparing data, making it more layman terms, that kind of thing. Pitting places or industries against one another is also great. You need to also then send those stories to the right people. So siphon those off to the industries or the locations that are relevant to that specific case study. Follow up with something new. And I mentioned it once before, I'll mention it again. Leverage your position as experts in law. Journalists love to quote people who know what they're talking about, people who have that accreditation next to their name, because it does have weight to it. So don't forget that, and do use that where you can to leverage those opportunities for you. And I think that is it. Any questions?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joanna. We do just have one more poll question that we'd appreciate.
Oh, do we? Oh.
Well,
yeah, that was it. Yeah. I
yeah,
forgot
so
about
we just wondered if there were any campaign types that people would like more information on. We're not going to bombard you with information about it. We're just doing some more in-person and online training next year. So we just really appreciate having a bit more insight into what people found interesting, or something that they'd think would be difficult to do themselves, and therefore would, value another session on something like that. So I'll leave that up just for people to vote on that. And I also have put our advent calendar link in the chat. So any law firm employees that are on the call, if you haven't already entered today's advent calendar prize, please make sure you do. And yeah, finally, thank you so much, Joanna. That was really interesting. And I always find your campaigns super creative. And I wonder how you come up with the ideas from, some sometimes dull information.
Yes. Well, it's not just me. It is team members as well. So it's always a collaborative effort, but it is always interesting to see what we can do with different data sets for sure.
Amazing. And we did have one comment who said, I'm just really grateful that much of this is provided to us by the conscious team within the SEO work that you assist with us so brilliantly. So
that's good.
I can definitely relate to that. As you were talking through, I was like, wouldn't it be nice if I just had somebody to do this for me?
Oh, maybe in future we can do more on that when we all have time.
Perfect. So I'm going to stop the record.